Before we start on this final bit, Cameron, don't bother about. I'm not sure if it's in part 1, part 2 or part 3 when I was walking dog this morning. Just leave that in where I've got it wrong about VAC. Can't be arsed having to retrace it. We all make mistakes. So, even Julian makes them. Right, Julian, while we're on the while we're talking about TalkSport, has he gone a bit of flat, TalkSport boxing at the moment, and what's the problem?
I'll tell you how flat it's gone. I'm probably not going to help you with my answer. I've zoned out from it. I've stopped listening to it. It used to be juicy, and it used to be, like you always say, we talk about the things that other people don't want to talk about. There was an element of that with TalkSport. Probably
gone now, that,
6 to 12 months ago there was an element now. And now it's just become, I wonder if the producers have said you're going to reduce access, because you get to a stage where people are just saying, well, I'm not going to go on. I always remember in the day, showing my age, the James Whale radio station. Remember, he's been on TV.
He was very well in with Calendar, wasn't he, at one point? West Yorkshire
James
bloke.
Whale got to the stage where
he had a programme on ITV.
He used to love it, and then they marginalised him because they couldn't control James Whale, so they took him off. And I'm not saying that TalkSport was as controversial as that, but it's just become the stage now. It's like they're becoming like everybody else. They become saturated, don't they? They lose that unique selling point. They lose the edge. Become edgy, like Channel 4 used to have a lot of edgy programs, and then they become more commercial because advertisers and sponsors.
More agreeing with everything now. They seem to go after them.
Advertisers,
now it's
sponsors,
just agreeing. There's no split debate. There's no good cop, bad cops anymore. They're just agreeing with everybody that comes on.
And that's it. And it's this.
We need shaking up.
It's the whole thing, isn't it? It's.
What do you think to the bench there? What we call the bench. We've got Judge Jordan, the guard, and Juggiers. They're the three on the bench. But are they doing themselves justice? I'm not so sure.
There was a moment where, like I say, so for Spencer Oliver, for example, I met Spencer once. Yeah, she was a good guy, hell of a fighter. But there was a moment.
We're going to fight Nas, wasn't it, at one point?
Oliver was there. I remember his fight with Keith Mullins. God, I want to fight that one. I think it was Southern Area title fight. It was a brilliant fight. And Spencer could fight, but as a guy, I'm sure he's a good guy. But I guess what you have to look at, you have to balance everything out and say, well, first of all, I've got a nice little job now with TalkSport. I'm on salary, okay. The profile's out there. I'm at the shows. I'm around the shows. I've found this, instead of bitty pundit work like Spencer's had, and like the Garden, they've now got this presence.
Regular gig.
You've got a regular gig where they're earning good money. Now, after a while, you become too outspoken and too controversial, as I've said about James Whale and stuff. You stop getting access. You become marginalised, and you no longer become mainstream. And I think that's happened. And I think the Gad will always be the Gad. But I think Spencer, there's just, there was a moment with Spencer where he went after Conor Benn. He had a moment where for about 3 to 4 weeks he just didn't care. And he was quite vocal about the whole thing for reasons that we know. He's been a former fighter who got injured himself, and he knows the dangers of boxing. And he's just suddenly just become a bit more laughy and a bit more jokey. He was always very cringe around Anthony Joshua. I thought that was like awful, but he's, like I just said about Simon Jordan, you become the kind of man you always hated. And I think that what's happening now with the Gareth A. Davies, Simon Jordan, Spencer Oliver. Initially you had 3 really distinct personalities and 3 voices and 3 different points of view. We knew what each one was. They're almost like morphing into each other and becoming agreeable and jokey and laughy. That it's just become a bit of a parody of what it used to be. So I think TalkSport's disappointing. I think the clickbait, people use clickbait of course, but the clickbait's very, very prescriptive. And I never thought I would say this, but I always thought Eddie was just being paranoid, and we're being decent to Eddie today, but I think there was a bias towards Frank and becoming anti-Matchroom for a while. And I don't know if advertisers, producers, sponsors have just said, tone it down a bit, just tone it down a bit, and they've lost themselves somewhere for me. And maybe it's Adam Catterall still seems that sole voice. And what I did notice was the last video that Adam Catterall did, it was it was like Simon Jordan was talking about, you know, that Nigel Bain had threatened him, was going to give him a slap, and they were making jokes of it, and they were like, Simon Jordan was trying to get his point across, and they were being a bit jokey, going, "This is your view, isn't it, Simon?" And it was like they were almost like throwing him under a bus. But I just don't like the way that it's going. I don't like the way that they're coming across, and they're just becoming IFL Mark II, realistically, aren't they? And I think that's where they'll end up.
Yeah, disappointing from them. Right, we'll finish off. Well, we've still got half of this video. I'm probably going to go into another one, and then that'll be it. Eubank Jr. against Beefy Smith rematch. We had Beefy Smith to win, didn't we, on points or late stoppage? It didn't happen. What's your take on that fight last night? Because that's thrown a spanner in it works, hasn't it?
First of all, you all know me long enough to hopefully I've got an honesty about me that when I say something, I mean it. I said the last time I was on your channel, I had Eubank beating Smith. I thought it'd be too much for Smith, and I got it so wrong. And I said on your channel last time, that's the last time I'm going to pick Eubank Jr. Absolute last time. And I'm not just saying this, if Anna was here, Anna would tell you, but I watched it last night, and she says, "What do you really think? You've gone for Smith on points, what do you really think?" And I says, "I can't say it, I'm afraid to say it. I'm not going to say I told you so, when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So I can't say it, I'm afraid to say it." I said it to Max as well. I said, "I just think Eubank's got the beating of Smith, but I can't say it because Eubank's the fighter I get it wrong every time. I thought he beat Billy Joe, even though he had hardly any experience. I had him to beat Billy Joe.
Yeah.
I had him to beat Groves, and I had him to beat Smith last time, and I keep getting Eubank wrong." And I went, right, like I said to you, last time I back Eubank, I'm clearly wrong about Eubank. This ability that I believe he's got, he clearly doesn't have it. His domestic leveling is failed. And he bloody showed it last night, didn't he? There's various things you can talk about. First of all, this is where I want the boxers and the technical people and the commentary to talk and come out. And what nobody noticed straight away was in the first 30 seconds, minute, I watched it, and I said before the bell went, I said to my son was watching it as well, Joe. I said to Joe, if Eubank comes out with this crazy Roy Jones style that he started developing, this low left hand, this loose language style, putting his chin over his knee, if Eubank comes out with that, he's learnt nothing. I says he'll get blown away again. I says I'm hoping to see, I'm not seeing any training, I said I'm hoping to see more of a compact defence, a little bit more like he was in the early days.
Yeah.
And he came out, and the first thing I noticed was he'd got both hands up. You know, I'm not talking like a high Don Curry guard. He got both hands up in a better position. I thought, well, that's really positive. And then the second thing I noticed after about a minute was he was shortening his punches, everything. Even the jab was a shorter, more slam jab. He was creeping in slightly. He was shortening his punches, and he was controlling that centre of the ring. And none of those things he did in the first round. In the first fight, he moved to the outer circle. Everything was loose and languid. He was all over the place. And after about a minute, I turned round and I said, now this is going to be interesting. I think I sent Max a couple of audios, and I says, this is going to be interesting. We're going to see a different fight tonight. And we did. There was definitely problems.
Penny dropped with him, didn't it?
It did. There was
listening to instructions.
There was some problems with the balance. We all saw the balance with Smith.
In the first fight, you mean?
In the second, last night. The ankles.
Oh, you mean Smith's balance?
Smith's balance was.
But he injured him. He didn't look right, did he?
There was something not quite right about both his ankles. He went over quite funny on both of them. But to be fair to him, he said, I've always had dodgy ankles. He didn't turn around and say, I've damaged my ankle. He didn't cry injury. He put it more on the weight. But I've always believed, I know he won the WBO title, but I've always believed Smith was kind of fringe world level. I thought he was given that world title. If you remember who he beat, that guy was awful. I thought he was given the world title by Warren, and I've always believed him to be fringe world level, and I think so it's looked. We know, like Canelo, different level, but
Euro level guy, Smith, a good solid Euro level.
Give him a real working over, didn't he?
Jamie
Mungawa, I think he gave him a real working over.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And I thought Smith's a good solid fighter, good basics, and that's why I thought the last time Eubank would beat him, I think he had more about him, and I was wrong, but I just got it the wrong way around, but I called it wrong because I did say that I thought Smith would win. But deep down I knew Eubank had the beating of him, and you have to wonder why he triggered that rematch clause, because you could argue there was nowhere else for him to go, but he could have waited around and got the Conor Benn fight for twice the money, and he obviously knew it just didn't work for him last time. Smith is...
Maybe Eubank knew he didn't put the effort in for him, and this time he'd have to.
There was definitely something, wasn't there? Smith never got out of first gear. You can argue, was it because the weight hurt him, or was it because Eubank never let him, and Eubank did everything right? He shortened everything. Eubank's punches were complete. Everything was shorter. Even when he was showing the right uppercut. If you watch the first fight when Eubank was throwing that right uppercut, chin was in the air, there were long looping uppercuts. Last night the chin was down, the shots were shorter, the jab was shorter, the left hook was shorter, everything was shorter, and the feet were better, and the hands were, the mid-range was there, and I just thought Eubank boxed brilliant. The knockdown was a cracking shot. It was a sickening right uppercut. It took everything out of him. Smith, brave as they come. I do think as well, you got to be really careful when you're trainers and you're building fights up and you start mocking people, throwing towels at them, because the irony was they should have pulled Smith out of that fight a couple of rounds earlier, but they obviously knew after throwing the towel at Boma
They couldn't do it.
they couldn't do it. They could not. You could see there was a moment where...
Why didn't Paul Smith throw the towel? Didn't he have hold of
I
it?
was going to say there was a moment where Paul Smith was like that, and you could see him thinking,
Jim Royal, you should have thrown the towel.
he should have thrown the towel in, but they give so much stick because Roy Jones' first fight had hold of the towel. Listen, you can't play with fighters' health and fighters' well-being if, never mind what's happened before the build-up,